Imagine for a moment you're way up there, 35,000 feet, just cruising along. Every single part of that flight, takeoff, cruising, landing, it all relies on this incredible, almost unbelievable precision. Safety, too, of course. And a huge part of that comes down to these tiny components, things you probably never even think about, but they're absolutely foundational. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's really explore the unseen forces keeping those planes flying safely. Today, we are doing a deep dive into one of those critical, often invisible pieces, the aircraft accelerometer market. Our mission. We're taking a global look, then zooming into the regions. We'll look at the market's path history, projections, growth rates, all the way to 2033. And this is all powered by some exclusive research from Cognitive Market Research. So think of this as your shortcut to getting really informed on this, niche but vital global industry. So let's start big picture, the global snapshot. The market was valued at, $251.49 million back in 2021, and it's projected to grow, reaching about $790.27 million by 2033. That works out to a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of 2.4%. Now that sounds like steady growth rate, but what's really driving these numbers? What does it tell us about aviation tech overall?
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is just how fundamental these things are. It's about way more than just steady growth, huh? Basically, accelerometers measure changes in speed really precisely. This lets the plane systems know exactly how it's oriented and moving, in 3D space. Think about a fighter jet pulling GDs or even just a passenger plane hitting turbulence. These sensors, they're critical. They feed data to the flight controls for stability, for safety. Everything from the autopilot to systems that warn about terrain relies on this data. So this growth, it's not just like more planes being built. It reflects this deeper trend towards digital cockpits, more automation, more precision needed, even on older planes getting upgrades. And to really get a handle on this market, we need to break it down, look at the regions, the countries, see where the real energy is, where the growth is really happening.
Absolutely. So from that global view, let's zoom in. We'll start our regional journey, if you will, in North America. As a whole, this region pulled in $1,211.88 million in 2021 in the projection. It's looking like $1,546.43 million by 2033. That's a CIGR of 2.103%. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you drill down within North America, the growth isn't uniform at all. The U.S., the biggest piece, is expected to grow at about 1.915% CAGR. But look at Canada, it's growing faster, 2.895% CAGR. And Mexico, too, pretty strong at 2.719%. So what do you make of these different speeds, especially Canada and Mexico outpacing the U.S.?
Well, North America is, the traditional aerospace giant. So the pattern there is less about tons of brand new planes being built and more about upgrades, keeping the existing fleets efficient and state-of-the-art. The U.S. market is very mature, so its growth, yeah, it's a bit more subdued. It's driven by those ongoing modernizations, replacing older parts, both commercial and defense. The higher KGRs in Canada and Mexico, even though the dollar amounts are smaller, could point to a few things, maybe specific defense modernizations, government contracts, or even, like you said, MRO maintenance, repair, overhaul. Maybe they're becoming hubs for servicing aircraft from all over, and those older planes need new instruments.
That's a really interesting take on North America, a mature market, but still with these dynamic pockets. Okay, let's shift our focus eastward now over to Europe. A continent with such a deep history in aviation, what are the numbers telling us there? The market was around $510.42 million in 2021, and it's forecasted to hit $648.14 million by 2033. That's a 2.026% CAGR overall. We see places like the UK growing at 2.768%, Germany at 2.4%, France, though, a bit more moderate, 1.549%. Then you get some really low ones like Switzerland at 0.4%, Luxembourg 0.563%, barely moving. But then, the real surprise here, this category called Rest of Europe, it's showing a strong 3.782% CAGR. So we got this mix of moderate growth, some minimal, and then this Rest of Europe really standing out. What's going on? Is investment shifting around, or are the main players just consolidating?
Europe definitely presents, a mixed picture. It really reflects the diverse economies across the continent, different stages of aviation development. A lot of these are mature markets, like the U.S. we just talked about. Growth is steady, sure, but not explosive. Often it's about upgrading the planes they already have, not massive expansion. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that Rest of Europe number, yeah, that's really intriguing. I mean, 3.782%, that's the highest growth within Europe. It suggests there's significant activity, maybe less obvious investment happening those smaller countries grouped together. It could be specialized defense programs, maybe in Eastern Europe, or maybe new niche aerospace manufacturing hubs popping up. or even just growing airline demand in countries we don't usually think of as big aviation players. It definitely shows new pockets of activity are bubbling up there.
Fascinating. Those hidden dynamics are key. Okay, let's pivot now to Asia Pacific, because here the story is really about robust growth. The market value is already $692.91 million in 2021, and it's expected to climb to nearly $1,998.72 million by 2033. That's an impressive CAGR, 3.125%. China's leading the charge regionally, growing at 3.339%, and India, what really impressing, with a 3.84% CAGR. Southeast Asia also jumps out, 3.438% growth. So Asia Pacific is clearly the growth leader. What's making this region such a powerhouse for accelerometers beyond just, general economic growth?
Yeah, this region's high growth, it's a massive signal. It points to a pretty profound shift happening in global aviation. This raises an important question, though. Why this speed? It's more than just the economy growing. Asia-Pacific's surge, it's fueled by several things happening at once. You've got budget airlines expanding like crazy, opening up tons of new routes. You've got governments actively trying to build up their own aerospace industries. Think China's push with COMAC. And of course, defense. Many countries are strategically boosting their military capabilities, often meaning more sophisticated planes, which need more sensors like accelerometers. India is a great example, booming domestic air travel and big defense modernization plans. It really makes Asia-Pacific the main engine driving the whole global market forward right now.
That makes a lot of sense, especially considering the scale and the economic drive in many of those countries. Okay, let's shift south now to South America. Here, the market grows from about $174 million in 2021 to roughly $208 million by 2033. That's a 1.419% CAGR. Brazil is the main player, as expected. Argentina, Colombia, Peru show growth between 1 and 2%, so this is definitely a more modest story compared to, say, Asia Pacific. What factors are keeping the growth a bit more subdued here?
South America's growth is, relatively slower. It's likely a mix of things, ongoing economic ups and downs in some key countries, the pace of building needed infrastructure, and just varying levels of investment and really modernizing or expanding aviation. Brazil's significant, yes, but the overall regional numbers suggest a more gradual evolution. Less aggressive buying of new fleets or big tech upgrades compared to those high-growth areas we just discussed. It suggests a market that's maybe still finding its rhythm in terms of consistent, widespread aviation development.
Right, a clearer picture there. Now let's turn to a region that's really been making headlines in global aviation lately, the Middle East. The market value there was around $140 million in 2021, projected to hit just over $200 million by 2033, growing at a pretty robust 2.945% CAGR. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the UAE, they're the key players. And the UAE especially stands out, a CAGR of 3.649%, impressive. Even the rest of Middle East is climbing fast at 3.551%. So beyond just general investment, what's driving this? What specific strategies, especially in places like the UAE, are creating such strong demand for these components?
Oh, the Middle East's strong performance is definitely tied to major strategic investments. Often it's about diversifying economies away from just oil. Countries like the UAE, they are pouring money into becoming world-class aviation hubs, right? Expanding their airlines into huge global carriers, modernizing defense forces. This means big orders for new, advanced aircraft and lots of upgrades for existing planes. All of that directly fuels demand for high-tech parts like accelerometers. Those high CAGR, especially UAE and the rest of Middle East, really highlight how actively that region is building its aerospace power, both commercial and military. They're positioning themselves as major global players.
Okay, and finally, let's touch on Africa, a region that seems to be gaining real traction, moving from about $123 million in 2021 up to nearly $188 million by 2033. That's a CAGR of 3.042%. Nigeria is actually leading the growth there at 3.5%. South Africa follows at about 2.8%. So given where it's starting from, what trends suggest Africa's aviation scene is really starting to blossom, and what does that mean for these components?
Africa's growth trajectory is definitely promising. It reflects a continent where flying is becoming absolutely vital for connection, for economic growth. Countries like Nigeria, South Africa, they're seeing investment in air travel. Why? Growing populations, an emerging middle class, and just the basic need to connect people across vast distances. Now, the starting numbers are smaller, yes, but the consistent growth across the region shows a real commitment to expanding and modernizing air transport. It really positions Africa as a region with significant future potential for this market. It's about building that essential infrastructure for the long haul.
So what does this all mean? Let's try and bring it all together. What we've seen is, yes, the global aircraft accelerometer market shows modest but definitely stable growth overall. But the really striking thing, the aha moment for you perhaps, is how the emerging economies are really pushing things forward, particularly Asia Pacific, the Middle East, and Africa. That's where a lot of the momentum is. Meanwhile, the developed markets, North America and Europe, they're steady, sure, but growing slower. They seem more focused on upgrades, efficiency, because they're more mature markets. This isn't just about parts and numbers. It's understanding these subtle but really important shifts in global aerospace. You can see where the new hubs for innovation and demand are popping up, and that really shapes the future of flight. So just to quickly recap our deep dive, we've seen how critical these accelerometers are globally, how stable that base demand is, but also this dynamic shift where the big growth drivers are now in emerging markets, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa. You should now have a much clearer, more nuanced picture of this vital sector than most people out there.
Absolutely. That steady global growth, heading towards nearly $3.8 billion by 2033. It underscores just how essential these components are, constantly in demand. And we've really unpacked the different roles these regions play, haven't we? Mature markets, North America, Europe, they provide the stability, focusing on sophisticated upgrades, versus the emerging markets, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, really fueling the new growth, buying more planes, building infrastructure. And don't forget those interesting bright spots we highlighted. India's huge 3.84% growth, driven by domestic needs, the UAE at 3.649%, building its global hub status, and even that surprising rest of Europe at 3.782%, showing where new specialized centers might be emerging. It tells quite a story.
It really does. And consider this as a final thought, how these tiny, intricate parts, accelerometers, they aren't just tech gadgets. They act like tiny indicators, signaling these much broader global shifts. Shifts in technology and economic development, maybe even geopolitical influence playing out in the skies. So what impact could this regional growth in aerospace tech, especially in those emerging areas, have on global trade and travel over the next decade? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay informed and stay ahead.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're zeroing in on some really critical but often unseen players in modern flight, aircraft accelerometers. You know, the incredible ballet of safety and advancement you see in aviation. It doesn't just happen. It relies on these incredibly subtle, constant measurements. It gives the aircraft a sort of sixth sense. We're about to explore how these devices are, well, constantly feeling the pulse of an aircraft, measuring vibration, motion with just phenomenal sensitivity.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is really to go beyond just what these essential components are. We want to understand why they're absolutely indispensable for modern flight, how they're genuinely driving innovation forward, and also what significant hurdles, stand in the way of them being adopted even more widely. Because given how fast aviation is evolving, everything from commercial giants to autonomous drones grasping their growing importance for accurate flight data for advanced navigation, well, it's more crucial than ever.
Okay, so we've set the stage a bit on what they are generally. Let's really try and unpack their fundamental roles, inside an aircraft's nervous system, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do these, well, seemingly simple motion detectors become so critical to something as complex as flying a plane?
Yeah, it's fascinating because their role is truly critical across a whole range of modern aviation systems. It's not just measuring motion. They're providing that really high-frequency data that's vital for, say, fly-by-wire systems and autopilot control. It helps ensure the aircraft stays exactly on its intended course with just micro-precision. And they are absolutely vital for flight stability. They allow for these instantaneous, almost imperceptible adjustments to counteract turbulence or, sudden wind shifts. Keeps the plane incredibly steady.
Right.
And here's a really significant point. They power the onboard diagnostics. So imagine transforming raw vibration data into actionable, potentially life-saving intelligence. They're constantly feeding engineers and pilots real-time information about the aircraft's health. This allows for proactive maintenance before issues even become noticeable.
Wow. And this whole capability, it ties directly into that increasing global emphasis we see on flight safety and the huge demand for real-time data analysis. That real-time diagnostics part is, well, it's almost mind-bending. The idea that these tiny devices are literally feeling the pulse of a huge machine miles up, making decisions faster than any human could react. But what's really propelling this technology, pushing it from maybe the fringes right to the absolute core of aviation's future. What are the big trends fueling this demand?
Well, one of the most powerful drivers is simply the sheer global expansion of aviation fleets, both commercial and
Yeah.
military. As you get more aircraft taking to the skies worldwide, there's just a corresponding surge in the need for increasingly reliable, increasingly precise performance evaluation tools and accelerometers.
Right.
They're right at the heart of that required precision. We're often talking about instruments using, microelectromechanical systems, MEMS technology to get just phenomenal sensitivity, detecting accelerations down to tiny fractions of a G.
Okay, so that global expansion makes sense for the big jets, the military planes. But are there other, maybe less obvious areas in aviation where accelerometers are making a maybe surprising impact?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing accelerometers make a really powerful impact in the UAV unmanned aerial vehicle and the drone segments. For these smaller aircraft, often flown remotely, compact design and, well, unparalleled precision are just vital, non-negotiable, really. Integrating them here allows for vastly improved control, much better surveillance capabilities, think infrastructure inspection, environmental monitoring, and even really precise remote delivery.
Like those delivery drones we hear about.
Exactly. And this, in turn, it fuels significant innovation in these rapidly emerging aviation sectors. It pushes the boundaries of what these devices can achieve in a much, much smaller package.
Okay, so we're talking more planes, new types of aircraft. That paints a pretty compelling picture. But how do accelerometers fit into that broader trend towards smarter, more integrated avionics, those almost, thinking aircraft platforms?
Right. Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, accelerometers are increasingly being embedded right within intelligent aircraft platforms and what people often call IoT-enabled systems. So essentially, this allows aircraft components to talk to each other and to ground control in real time. It's a bit like a connected smart home, maybe, but obviously on an infinitely more critical scale.
Okay.
And this deep integration, it offers real-time feedback that is truly transformative. Imagine like a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration starting up in an engine. Without these smart systems, it might just go unnoticed until, well, potentially a catastrophic failure. But now, that tiny data point picked up by an accelerometer, it triggers an immediate alert. It lets engineers address the issue during just routine maintenance.
Turning a potential emergency into just a planned fix.
Precisely. It transforms it into a proactive, simple repair. And this shift really supports predictive maintenance, which drastically reduces those unplanned downtimes we mentioned. And crucially, they're becoming absolutely central to safety-critical devices. Think flight recorders, black boxes, and crash detection units. This aligns directly with stricter global aviation safety regulations that demand higher levels of data recording and system resilience.
Okay, so we've covered the vital role they play, the exciting growth areas, the incredible precision these devices offer. It sounds almost perfect. But with all this potential, this vital importance, what are the turbulence points? What are the headwinds for this technology and its market?
Yeah, that raises an important question because despite how essential they are, there are several pretty significant challenges. Firstly, there's the high cost. We're talking about aerospace-grade sensors here. You can imagine, given the extreme precision and reliability needed, these aren't exactly off-the-shelf components you buy anywhere.
Not like the accelerometer in my phone.
Not quite. And this high cost can be a really significant barrier, especially, for smaller manufacturers or maybe drone startups trying to innovate or just enter the market.
And I imagine aviation, of all industries, it must have some of the most rigorous regulatory hurdles to clear.
Oh, absolutely. Meeting the stringent aviation regulatory and certification requirements, it complicates market entry considerably. It's a huge factor. It means extensive, expensive testing and validation processes, and that can significantly slow down the introduction of even, really groundbreaking new sensor innovations because the approval hoops are just so rigorous.
Makes sense. Safety first, always.
Always. And then finally, there's the ongoing challenge of environmental durability. These sensors, they have to function accurately without any degradation in really extreme temperatures, think freezing altitudes and hot tarmac under intense G-forces during maneuvers, and in environments with a lot of electromagnetic noise from other systems. That requires really advanced engineering, specialized materials, which in turn increases the overall system complexity and, well, drives up those costs we talked about earlier.
So what we've really unpacked today is that aircraft accelerometers are truly complex, yet absolutely vital technology, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
They seem to sit right at that intersection of safety, precision, and relentless innovation. And they are quite unequivocally pivotal in shaping the future of how we fly.
Absolutely. And, as the aviation industry continues its relentless demand for smarter, more reliable flight solutions, it's really fascinating to ponder how this continuous pressure might push the boundaries of accelerometer tech even further. Could we see advancements that enable entirely new forms of air transport, maybe even fully autonomous sky networks where aircraft navigate with this kind of unprecedented self-awareness? It makes you wonder, what other unseen components, much like these increasingly sophisticated accelerometers, might be the crucial key for that next big leap in aviation?